Hi everyone, Mark DeJesus here, and today I'm going to be talking about compulsive oversharing in regards to a question that came in that I think would be very helpful for all of us to take in. Do you share a little bit too much? Do you overshare? Do you feel like you need to share everything with everyone? Do you kind of back the truck up and feel that you need to kind of tell people everything about what's going on with you? Well, today I'm going to address that, and I think it could be very helpful for us to have a bit of awareness and discernment so we can navigate this with some greater health and some greater fruit in how we do relationships. If this material is a blessing to your life and journey, go to markdejesus.com, markdejesus.com. There's a topics page where you can find links to all kinds of subjects where it'll point you to free resources, materials. There's courses, books, courses, and you can also support these resources. So if it's a blessing to your life, consider that. But let's get right into this question because I'm very passionate about helping believers to navigate their journey with greater mental health, emotional health, and relationship health. And all of it lands within this question. The question says, "Hi, Mark. I compulsively overshare personal information about my past and present struggles with people I haven't spent enough time building trust with. In a weird way, I'm afraid if I don't confess everything I've ever done with everyone I've ever met, then I'm not walking in truth." Already in this question, we can see the distortion of OCD rising up here. This is obsessive compulsive. And what obsession does, it creates a distorted interpretation. And many obsessive compulsives that are Christians, and they have scrupulosity, religious OCD, they can very easily fall into a distorted pattern. Now, I want to say this. When I talk about compulsive oversharing, talk too much, over talking, this isn't just in the category of those who have OCD. There's many who have obsessive compulsive tendencies. And I really think a lot of us in the body of Christ can really be blessed by having an honest awareness of how we share and at times share too much, and learning in the process on how to develop our discernment of when to share, maybe when not to share. You know, there is a principle in the Bible where Jesus talked about not sharing your pearls before swine. And it's not calling other people swine by any means, but there is an aspect where the treasured places of your heart need some time, needs to show where what you're sharing is valued. And there's a process of that I can get into in application of answering this question. But right up front, there's a distortion. And the distortion is a very black and white, extreme interpretation. And that's what obsession does. It creates a very distorted interpretation of certain topics. So the topic here for this person is walking in truth. And many obsessors, many compulsives, they distort walking in truth. It's very heavy burdened. There's a lot of dark distortion over it. It's very law-based. I've got to walk in truth. There's no room for process. It gets really off the rails. So right up front, we can see that this will then force you to feel this disturbance that everybody you talk to, because there's a rule following you. And the rule following you is that you've got to confess everything you've ever done with everyone you've ever met. Whew, that's exhausting. Now, you might say, well, some of you listeners go, I don't have it that extreme. But when you're interacting in relationship, I see this a lot in the church. I even find throughout my journey, even in teaching and speaking, that people who come up and talk to me, they might be blessed by something I shared. And then they go into a very long dissertation about their journey. Bless their hearts. And I understand, but we feel that need, right? If we connect to somebody in some way, maybe something they shared or talked, we feel like there might be a connection. We go very deep, very fast. And it can be too much for the moment. I've even found too in my teaching and preaching that at times gone too much, too fast, even in what I was teaching on, right? And then I found in my healing and freedom journey, I found many times where I overshared. I gave too much. It was a fire hose. And then afterwards I realized, I think I did a little too much talking there. Or I've sat down with somebody and I couldn't get a word in edgewise. because all they were like a record that just kept going from the next track to the next track to the next track, sharing, talking, never taking a step back and listening. I find that even in relationship interactions, sometimes people get so lost in their sharing, they don't have an ability to go, let me sit back and let this be a pitch and catch, where we're volleying back to each other in that rhythm, because that's really where relationships have their best fruit, is when we learn to get in that rhythm. And that takes practice. It takes learning and growing. It takes practicing being able to share, but I don't have to share everything all at once, and I don't have to share it right up front, right away. And in this question, it's all very intense right up front. And I would say you probably have a healthy sense of, I want to have meaningful relationships. I want to have meaningful connections. But these obsessive distortions get in the way and don't let you just be yourself. So you continue. Like, I have an ethical obligation to make sure everyone knows who I was and what I did before Christ found me, so they can decide for themselves whether they really want to get close to me, to be my friend, or even hire me, whatever the case may be. There is a struggle in Christianity where I realize many brothers and sisters have a great deal of shame about their past. And it could be their past as a Christian. It could be their past before they were saved, where they don't like talking about it. They don't like sharing about it. And I think that shame has really gotten into the lens of these areas, because when shame gets into the picture, we feel the need to avoid it, hide it. It's disturbing. And I find that we have to revisit that the Bible talks about, while we were sinners, God demonstrated his love towards us. And so sometimes we forget that it's like, okay, I got saved, and then we struggle in our Christian life. Does he love me now? That's a whole other subject in itself, right? But we look back and it's like we feel that God looks at our sinful history or our struggles, our mistakes, bad decisions, whatever you want to call it. And that God looks at those things with disdain, and we don't take into consideration the depth of his love. And so part of the healing journey is, for many people, is coming to terms with being friendly or kind, compassionate about their past and their history. In fact, many who work in counseling see this day in and day out, is the past is creating such a disturbance that we run from it, we avoid it. And then when we're in relationship, we feel the need, I got to tell you all this. I got to tell you all this stuff, because I'm not sure. Here's the driving force. I'm not sure that you will love me and accept me if you know what I've been through, what I've done, the mistakes I've made. I think you may reject me. So I need to hurry up and get to that as quick as possible so I can find out, will you love me? And then what happens is we don't let relationship develop organically, because we don't meet somebody and then all of a sudden just start dumping the inner secrets of our hearts. It takes time. It takes development. It takes patience. So really what's happening here is there's an inward disturbance over your history, and there's distortions over it, that you aren't loved in those things. That God disdains them so much and disdains you in those things. And so there isn't an ability, there's a block in not allowing you to be able to let those past things, when they rise up, and oftentimes we get triggered by a memory, right? We get triggered by a memory of the past and our history. And the journey for all of us, whether it happened when you were a Christian or not, whatever those things happen, the trauma, the drama, the bad decisions, the mistakes, the sins, put it all the past stuff, those things rise up. And what do they often do? They accuse you. They disqualify you. And what we often do is we avoid them. We shove them away. We suppress them. We do some compulsive things to try to fix them. And what I encourage people to do is, when those things rise up and they accuse you, let them just flow right through. In fact, apply what I talk about when I talk about intrusive thoughts. If you just let that thought float right through and you feel anxious, you feel disturbed, because you're practicing facing that history in the perspective of God's love and his grace for you. The enemy is an accuser. And if you try to argue back, we always try to argue back. And don't you notice in those accusing thoughts, you argue back, you may get relief for a second, but then another one hits you because you're fighting by the letter of the law. And if we're going to look at you through the letter of the law, you're always going to lose. You're always going to lose. All of us will lose in the ring of that kind of competition. So instead, we embrace, yes, that happened, and I'm loved in it. And that takes practice. I had to learn, even in my religious perfectionism, there are aspects of my past that are very embarrassing. Ways I acted, ways I talked, things I did, and I would suppress it, avoid it, and change that subject as quickly as possible so that I could get back to, I'm doing good things over here, and okay, boy, that's scary. I've changed that approach to now more embracing it, leaning into it when it shows up in my thoughts. Yep, I see it. I see you. And I'm learning to practice being loved in the presence of these accusing thoughts. Because so many of us as believers, we are under the heel of a big giant boot over our heads, over accusations of where we fall short, of where we feel we struggle. And it leads to disqualification. You and I were not qualified because we did things well enough and we made great decisions. You and I are qualified through the work of what Christ has done. And we simply just said yes to it. And we're allowing its work to happen, have an effect in our life. And part of it is letting our story get redeemed. Because for many of us, the story of our history has an interpreter that's accusatory and harsh. And many of you, you're firing your interpreter. And you're letting the interpretation of Christ come into your life, where he sees you with compassion. And he's allowing the accusers to let go of their stones and dropping their rocks that they want to throw at you. Because you come into the light and you go, yeah, I see it. Yep, I see those decisions I've made. But I'm allowing the interpretation of compassionate grace to now come into my life so I can see my history through a new lens. Because whether you're a perfectionist or you have straight up OCD, or you're a believer that struggles with shame about your history, everything I'm saying could be so helpful. We're not going to run from it. We're not going to hide from it. We're not going to block our ears. I see it. I don't have to fuss over it. I don't have to argue. I don't have to interrogate it. I don't have to circle around and try to figure out every nuance of it. I'm going to see it through love. And I'm going to practice being loved. And it takes practice, because those thoughts and memories come through you and they raise up the shame and anxiety, and they tell the rejection lies. The rejection mindset will tell you, boy, they won't love you if they know. And God says, if they don't love you when they know this, that's their issue, because I love you right where you are right now. Step into the light of my love, because God's light is not a light of accusation and condemnation. His light is a light of love. But we go, but then when we step into it, it's so freeing. It's like, oh, he receives me in this. I've spent years trying to fix thoughts and fix memories and interrogate them and try to get them all just right. And I found such a more freeing thing to just embrace the flaws, the frailties, the weaknesses, the struggles of my past and my present. And so for you, you're going to need to starve your compulsion to have to tell all those details. Now, do we share details of our life? In due time, when somebody shows that they are safe to handle you sharing those things. Because there is an aspect of the pearls of your life. What are the pearls? The beauty, the treasure of what God's doing in your life. Healing and working on delicate areas. And someone has to show that they respect and treasure the value of those pearls. And that takes time. And that's not something that we just show up and just throw. And that's where I believe that principle has been very helpful for me. It's like, no, I don't need to share these things to everyone I meet. Now, I do have a ministry work where I share my journey and share what I'm going through. But it's a process I've gone through personally in my own life and even relationally, where somebody has to show in their life, in their journey, that they're safe to be able to hear the things that I'm wanting to share, because we can share too much too soon. And even in social media, in our social media culture, we can promote a sense of sharing too much too soon. And there are certain topics and things that we've gone through where they need to be shared in a safe place where you can process through. There's delicate issues of our traumatic past and things, battles that we're going through. Not everything, we kind of feel in this culture to share everything with everyone in social media. That's not necessarily the wisest thing to do. So I'll go back to your question here. I wonder if I get some kind of thrill, you wrote in quotes, or at least relief from oversharing. Let's put the thrill statement aside. It's not so much about the thrill as much as it is the sense of relief. There's a sense of anxiety and guilt that may be creating some of what you call the rush. That feeling, it's like an adrenaline. I don't know if I got it right. And then you feel a momentary sense of relief for oversharing. But then you say, I always come away from these interactions feeling overexposed and paranoid. My background is in poetry and creative writing, and I wonder if the oversharing impulse was enabled in these environments. It might be, in artist communities, there's a higher percentage of sensitivity there. Very sensitive to emotions, to certain things you feel, because in that it's your expression and how you create and how you develop art and express powerful truths and powerful insights. It could be. You say, because the more deep, personal, often shameful things I shared in poetry, the more certain people applauded me. So there is a thing too where people can get attention over oversharing. And I've seen this on social media many times where they'll overshare. And I feel a little cautious. I'm like, this is probably something they should share in a private session with someone, because these are very vulnerable things that I feel protective over. And but the problem is that gets attention. And it creates a unhealthy feedback loop, because then you get oversharing and then people in the comments, oh, this is great, I was so blessed, right? And it's challenging because we do want to encourage people, right? But we can encourage a feedback loop of oversharing things that maybe are not the best place, the best timing. And we need discernment in those areas, right? So you are onto something with that applause back, because then it can kind of create a loop of us keep doing that, and then we're sharing more and more and more. Nonetheless, I think it's important for the sake of my boundaries and my friends' boundaries that I learn to filter things better. I think that's a great statement. It's a wise statement. It's a grounded statement. How do I deal with the oversharing compulsion and get over the feeling that I need to give a disclaimer for myself? Well, let me talk about, I've already addressed some reasons, but let me talk about some reasons why we overtalk, we overshare, we say too much too soon. Sometimes it's just simple social awkwardness, where you in your nervousness, you start talking, you have nervous energy. And I found in social interactions, sometimes the silence can be uncomfortable, especially somebody that you haven't developed that real safety that you can just land and just be yourself in that silence. I find great relationships are relationships where when there's a little bit of silence, you don't feel the need to fill it all in. Right? But when you're nervous, you feel the need to fill it in. And this I found for myself, my wife's mentioned this too, at times in our journey, you feel the need to fill that space. So then you're over talking, you're oversharing. And then we get into the mode where we're trying too hard. In my pastoral work, I've encouraged people in my congregation. And sometimes it went over well. Sometimes it didn't go over well. I would just share to the kindest way I could. And sometimes no matter how kind I said it, it didn't go over well. Where I said, you don't have to try so hard. just, because they would just, it's like this hyper energy would come over them to talk and share. And sometimes they'd feel the need to share what God is doing and a testimony and this and that. And they want approval and they want this. You could see it. They so desperately want it. And the rejection mindset can be driving that, because rejection feels this neediness, right? And then what happens is there's this rejection loop that takes place. I have rejection in me, so I try too hard to talk, and then at some point, I'm going to wear out the listener. And they're going to like show something physically that they're not interested, they're going to be distracted, or they're going to maybe look in a different direction, or maybe they're just going to say, I got to go, or they have to shut it down. And then that communicates rejection to us. So it becomes this rejection loop that we live in. And that's why I talk so much about exposing the rejection mindset, because it helps with awareness. And I feel like what we need to do too is we need to do this in a non-shame way, in a compassionate way that says, you know what, I'm working on this. And if you're kind to yourself, then these moments can be places of compassion. When you walk away from a conversation and feel like, did I share too much? That may or may not be true. I find I could be too hard on myself thinking I overshared when I didn't. I just shared great things and got nothing. And sometimes when you're sharing and you take a chance, you need to walk away and applaud yourself that you at least took a step. Sometimes when you get and you share with someone, you go, let me just take a chance, and you share something and it doesn't go over great. Maybe they give you quick advice back. That's a common Christian thing to do. You share something and go, whoa, and they give you a fix. Have you read this thing, or have you gone to this thing? Maybe you should try this. It's like, for crying out loud, we're just talking here. Can we just talk and just share? Christians are compulsive about giving quick advice. It's like we need severe help in that area. It's a plague. Or you share and you get the dead stare. You get the crickets. You get nothing, right? And you're like, you walk away going, there's something wrong with me. And what I would say is, in those moments, celebrate the fact you took a step of vulnerability. It's important in compassionate awareness to celebrate, hey, I gave it a step, I gave it a try. There's times I've shared vulnerable aspects of my journey, got the dead stare, and I had to recalibrate myself. Mark, it's all right. You took a step, you shared, and now you realize, you know what? Maybe you can't really go there with that person. You just can't go there. And that conversation revealed you can't really go there with that person, maybe somebody else. But don't stop and put a wall up and say, I'm not going to share with anybody ever again, right? It's like, you know what? I'll try another time when it shows that it's a healthy place for me to do that. I think another reason that we overshare, this is a big one, is we feel we need to get our full story out to be understood. One of the things I even encourage people when they get counseling or coaching or help or therapy, or even they're sitting down and trying to get help from somebody in ministry or whatever, we have this driving force, and I've had it too. We feel the need, such a deep need to be understood, that we feel like we got to get the whole story out. And even in my session work, where I'll start to go, okay, let's kind of create some things we can move into. And they're like, wait, one more thing I need you to know. I got to tell you this, or we get very compulsive. I got to tell you that, because no, you're not really going to understand unless you know this, unless you know that. And let me give you another detail. It's an obsessive compulsive kind of response, but it happens to many of us because we have such a need of not feeling understood. So we feel like we got to share so much. Then another reason is this one that was brought about in this question. I feel like I got to get everything out so you will know, and I got to know up front if you'll reject me. It's like we need to put a disclaimer out there, and we do it all the time because we have a rejection-based belief in our own life, shame and self-hatred and unworthiness. It's like, if you know this, you're not going to love me anymore. And we've had so many experiences in the body of Christ where we've not been gracious people. We've not. Church, can we just admit it? We've not been very safe. We love to just lash out. We love to just throw judgment. And we do it all in the name of standing up for what's right or speaking truth or, and I'm with you. Speak truth, stand for what's right. But we need some real lessons on how to be loving and gracious within the midst of it. Because once love and grace get detached from what we're saying, what could set people free become daggers that can just erode people's hearts. And so those experiences make us go, I don't feel safe, so let me just get all the garbage out so then we can figure out we're going to be okay. And it's a rejection-based thing that it's how you see yourself. So this compulsive oversharing starts with you being kind to yourself. You are on a journey of seeing your story through a new lens of gracious compassion. Love is who God is. Grace is how he delivers it. Love is who God is in his kindness, in his patience, in his receptivity of you, in your goofiness, in your battles. Grace is his energy, his power, his ability working relationally. See, grace works relationally. Grace is not checking all the boxes, make sure you did all the things right. Grace is relational. It's walk together, get to know each other. We're going to take a journey. Grace is relational. And so you learn step by step how to be loved and to walk in love. And for many of you, you're on a journey like the Apostle Paul, because the Apostle Paul was a murderer. He killed Christians. He was converted and then was now going to the Christians that he was murdering. That's crazy, right? Knocking on the door and saying, hey, me, it's Paul. And people in the house might be heading for the closets or hiding because they're like, hey, is that guy? He's going to murder us. And he's like, no, I come with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Wait, what? Paul had to go through a journey of coming to terms with his past and seeing the beauty and radiance of Christ's work over his life. And if he can walk through that and put his past in perspective, so can you. So can I. And so when you feel that stuff rising up within you, don't run from it, don't hide from it, but don't get compulsively trying to fix it. Just let it wash through you. And you feel that anxiousness and you rise up. It's like, all right, I'm practicing. God, you love me. I struggle to feel it over that part of my story because I feel like I'm disqualified. But I'm learning to be loved by you in the midst of this. Because for many of us, it's really about how you see yourself. Your past disturbs you. You feel guilt. You're trying to alleviate guilt. Many of you go into confession and you try to confess things to people and you're calling all these people up on the phone and you're like trying to alleviate. And it's really about how you see yourself. And I've had to learn in my journey in calibrating my sharing that I need to first practice learning to be kinder, patient to myself as God is towards me. In that love, now we learn. Where I can walk away, and I've even had conversations recently where I think I overtalked a little bit, I got a little too excited about that subject and talked a little bit. It's okay. It's okay. It's sometimes okay to overtalk. And then I learn next time, it'd be more over here. Then there's other times where I didn't speak much. I just listened. I'm like, I probably could have, interjected, and I went into a rejection mode in the other way. And many people struggle with rejection, say, nobody cares, so I won't even bother sharing. That's a whole nother side, right? So we swing back and forth between those continuums because we're all goofy, broken people working on finding our way to navigate grounded places. So it's practice. It's learning to practice. And you realize, well, that was a bit too much. I learned now. Next time, I'll learn and I'll be a bit more grounded next time because I let the learning happen. Now, if we condemn and shame ourselves, we don't really learn, do we? Because when we're condemned and shamed, we're in fear and we're hiding. I'm going to get beat up. I'm going to get beat up. I'm going to get beat up. When we have gracious compassion, we take it. We're able to see it with sobriety. I'm learning. Because many of the things that you've been through in your life and your journey that you're ashamed of can actually be learning lessons for other people who are going through the same stuff. But your enemy doesn't want you to get empowered with that. So if he accuses you of your story, you see it as a liability. I'm here to tell you today, your story, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is an asset to you in the kingdom of God. It's actually a treasure, but it's all in how we see it. And God's allowing us in our journey, in our sharing, and in our connection to learn to see our story with greater grace. If this is a blessing to your life and your journey, I know it was for me. I was encouraged by this. So if it was to you, take a moment, go to markdasis.com. You can support this. You can check out all the material, share it with somebody who might benefit from it. And maybe this will bring up good discussions with those of you that you do love and do care for. And maybe it can bring about some healthy sharing where you can grow one with another together. So again, this is Mark DeJesus, your brother from another mother, just seeking to help you grow in the love of our Father, our God in heaven, who is our Father, the grace of Jesus Christ. And just walk in that and let it be seasoned in your life and your journey. So, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll be back again. But in the meantime, I'm out.